Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. I'm loving my life. I don't know what that was. We had some weird thing happen with the screens, but we're okay. We're doing great. How are you? Who could complain? Not me. Just give me 1 second. I made a mistake by saying I was completely ready. I just got to do one more thing here. And then we are indeed ready. I'm ready. We're going to have a great show. We got lots going on. I got some great insights, I think. We're going to get through this Iranian war together. We're almost there. We're almost there. It's almost time. Okay, now let me just get up the Rumble video. I had to finish my tweet. The tweet is good. Let me see where my things are. Here we go. I see we had no kites as of this morning, but now I got kites again. But they're not as bad as yesterday. I don't think I'm going to have to worry about the crazy kites that we had yesterday. One of them came down, and I did not get my drones. Okay, what's going on here? Give me a second. Oh, there we go. There we go. There we go. All right. Good morning, gang. Does anyone like snakes? Not me. Glad to be with you all today. We hate the snakes. We hate the snakes. We're not fans of the snakes. Good morning, crew. Gas, $3.69 here in Texas, says Jesus is King. NPC Mind conversations at daughter's soccer practice are getting more hostile, aggressive. Yes, indeed. I noticed the same. Seaburger says, good morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I do believe that all leprechauns must be Bitcoiners for that big, beautiful digital pot of gold. I like it. We're after the rainbow. We love it, but not the gay rainbow, just the normal rainbow. Not that there's anything wrong with being gay. If you're the leader of Iran, you can be gay too. It's fine. We're okay with that. No problems. Yeah, gas is always a conversation piece, depressing and confusing for most. We Bitcoiners have been expecting this for a long time. I declare a round of Lucky Charms for you all. Don't say that too loud. I don't want my kids hearing me say Lucky Charms. They're going to want the cereal. They love it. Good morning, Nolan and Great Awakening crew, and happy St. Patrick's Day indeed. Jesus is King 100%. Chef Zero, look, listen, learn more than enough for all and everyone ever now. Indeed. Wow, says Chef Zero. Jesus is King. Best to stay out of the conversations. I feel like they're explaining a movie where the only scenes, where they only seen bits and pieces indeed. Citadel Daniel in the house. Happy St. Patty's Day, Bitcoiners. The one day we go green instead of orange. We love the St. Patrick's Day. Yo, Chatelet. The luck of the Bitcoin. Bless your heart indeed. An appropriate thumbnail today, Nolan. Thank you. He's breaking through. I made it. Yo, yo, yo. 3, 2, 1. Showtime. Kites are gone. Doors are open. Kite drone update. It was a failure. So the problem is, always appreciative of the Awakening gang. Dang, don't stoop to their level. Dad jokes. So the thing with the drones here in Barbados is they're very illegal. And because we got Bill Gates types here who live here, and there's all kinds of paparazzi stuff going on. And so they banned them before they were really kind of that hobbyist. They banned them. So I can get denied entry into the island. That's kind of why I haven't brought them. Now, I see people with them taking pictures. There's licenses and stuff like that. I have a photographer friend who has one, but despite all my pleas yesterday, so it was the husband who offered it to me, but his wife put her foot down yesterday because she's a pretty big photographer here on the island that does a lot of weddings and stuff like that, and she needs the drone. So just as he was about to bring it over to me, she says, "What are you talking about?" So my drone war is failing. I'm like the Iranians. My drone war is not, my asymmetric warfare is not working. I thought I could rely on the drones. I can't. I need to figure this out. I got to get past the rules. I got to smuggle one in. If anyone is coming, I need you pirates to come and smuggle me in a drone because we got to fight the kite. Fight the kite. Now, the kites, oh, dang, I forgot. I got to do one thing before we get going here. I was so early today, and I don't really have the right amount of fake news for you all. Give me just 1 second here. I've got some really good ones. So we're not going to be that worried about fake news, as you can imagine. Hold on. Well, we'll just go with what I got. We don't need that many fake news stories today. Lucky with an update in Israel saying, yeah, I checked the flights too after. It seemed like 80% of them or something. It's pretty steady flow of air traffic in Israel. That's what I saw when I looked at the numbers. That's what I saw. Can you hear the... We gotta hope they go down. I don't know. What people put them up before school or something? I don't get it. It's the worst. All right, folks, we're going to get started. Let's acknowledge that's a major sunrise behind us. Even if there's kites, the sun doesn't care. The sun is operational. Even if there's kites, even if there's no drones, even if there are drones, Bitcoin doesn't care. We're doing great with the Bitcoin. It's way up this morning. We're having a good time. We're at what? 73,754 US trash tokens per Bitcoin. We're doing great. Let's have a coffee, talk about what's new. Raise the mug, indeed. Raven Scrag to Barbados. Gates is after our boy. Exactly. And we get JJ Fox. Just talk about Uncle Netten. Plenty of fake news there. Yeah, we're going to be talking about the fake news today. That is part of our show. That is locked and loaded and ready to go. Definitely going to be talking about the fake news. And we are going to have a look at some of the great news that's out there for the NPCs before we get started. I don't have much NPC news today, but I've got some all-time bangers. So what I'm lacking in quantity, I'm going to make up for in quality today. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Here we go. Let's hear what the NPCs are hearing about. You're not going to guys, it's really bad. It's really bad. Terrifying study, according to the Daily Mail. It's terrifying. Predicts exactly how many people will die. They're going to be dead by 2050 if we don't take urgent action, guys. I know you heard it when it was 2020 and 2012 and 2025 and 2030, and it was 10 years, and 10 years are all going to be dead, and in 20 years. This time it's real, okay? You've got exactly 24 years left, and then we're all going to die. A study said it. Terrifying study. Revealed. Everyone, it's been revealed. This is what we know. This is what we know. Hey, this is what we know, everyone. This is what we know. We got this problem. Terrifying study predicts exactly how many people, if we don't take urgent action, a terrifying study has predicted. If we don't take, they keep repeating the headline. Researchers from the Catholic University of Argentina, guys, set out to understand how rising temperatures will affect physical activity. And as a result, premature deaths. This is the same as the sports argument. You're not going to be able to play sports. No more sports. Worryingly, their findings suggest that by 2050, each additional month with an average temperature above 27.8. I'm going to rerun these numbers because best case scenario are 27.7. Will that change the physical inactivity by 1%? It's the exercise one. You're not going to be, I'm telling you, I was going to go for a longer walk yesterday, and then I checked the temperature, and it was 29.1. I'm used to only going at 29.0, and I ended up walking exactly 1.3% less. So all these numbers are very true. It translates to a predicted 470,000 to 700,000 additional premature deaths every year because we're not exercising enough. It's too hot. I can't go out. I can't exercise. I'm not going to do anything. If it hits that 0.8, whoa, prioritizing heat adaptive urban design, subsidized climate controlled exercise facilities, and targeted heat risk community. We all have to be indoors. We're going to have to be indoors. That's what's going on. Oh, this is what we need. Lucky's already living in the future. He's taking his kid to play ice hockey this evening. That is one of these subsidized climate controlled exercise places. Rinks, hockey. You got to go to the hockey ring. That's all that's going to be left in Israel. That's it. No more. Climate change is making the world hotter, with the last 3 confirmed to be the hottest on record, guys. The hottest on record. So that's what's going on. No more exercise. It's way too hot to do anything. Thank you, Daily Mail. Now we know. This one is just funny. You don't have to add much. Washington Post says some 200,000 immigrant truck drivers will begin to lose their commercial driver's license as they expire under a new Trump administration rule that takes effect Monday. 200,000 immigrant truck drivers? What? And what they go on to tell you in this article is that if they can't speak English, so what a meanie that Trump is, not letting illiterate people drive on our roads. Can you believe it? Can you believe that Trump is preventing the illiterates from driving? Remember when Trump, he's such a turncoat. Remember he said he loved the poorly educated, and now people who can't read or write English can't drive anymore. I thought he loved the poorly educated. What a hypocrite. What a hypocrite indeed. So those are our fake news stories of the day. Pardon me for not getting more of a supply. There we go. What do people say about it? We got this. Ice World by 2000. It's not good for the NPCs, indeed. Cats and dogs living together. Pure pandemonium. Indoor, forever safe. An unbelievable amount of shit information the NPCs, sludge people endure and seem to actually enjoy talking about. Indeed. Noha in the house. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Hi, Awakeners. Let's do it, indeed. So let's get going. I'm glad, Lucky, you've got the ice rink, and indeed, hopefully no sirens. Hopefully the only sirens you hear are the goal-scoring kind, right? We like the goal-scoring sirens in the hockey arenas. We don't like the rocket sirens. The one I don't like, though, is that crazy cannon. If you guys don't know much about ice hockey, Columbus Blue Jackets, they're sort of in the Union colors and motif of the Civil War. And whenever they score a goal, whereas most rinks have a siren when you score, they have a cannon, and they shoot a cannon, and it's so loud and annoying. And unfortunately, my team a couple years ago got like 10 goals scored on them or something, and people still have PTSD about that from all the noise. All right. So let's start with our Iranian war update. Not much believable stuff happening on the ground. Rockets, looks like there were a few in Iraq last night. Looks like maybe one got through into Dubai again. It looks like one of the oil things got hit. Data Republican is looking into some of this stuff today. Iran war, day 17, OSINT synthesis. She looks like she's got some of the more credible stuff coming out. We'll see. Your NATO allies are not coming. And it's not because they disagree with the war. It's because most of them can't fight it, she says. Here she's looking at some of the naval capability, some stats. She's always a good reference. So we love that. And here we see a bit more from the Strait of Hormuz. Video shows traffic going through over the last 24 hours. We've had a little bit. This is yesterday's news, so I didn't get an updated one. But there are still boats going through the Iranian side, it looks like. Our friend Sal has a great update, as he usually does, on what's going on. I got to get better. There we go. So here's Sal talking about the situation with the traffic in the strait, and I'll play that for you now.
We're eastbound and down. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano, and welcome to the March 16th, 2026 edition of What's Going On with Shipping, the Strait of Hormuz edition. And that's right, we are eastbound and down with one of the best transportation movies ever made, Smokey and the Bandit, 1977. I mean, bootlegging Coors beer from Texarkana to Atlanta. Come on. Doesn't get better. But the reason for the movie has to be this: the motor vessel Star Gwyneth. Now, you may remember Star Gwyneth. She was a subject to an attack off the west coast of the UAE inside the Persian Gulf. Well, Star Gwyneth made her run out through the Strait of Hormuz. She is now off the eastern coast of Oman. So Star Bulkers was able to get the vessel out and make its run. She's not alone. There's a batch of other ships that are doing it, and we're going to talk about all that and give you the latest update on the Strait of Hormuz. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. Go over to Lloyd's list here. Dynacom operated VLCC carrying Saudi crude passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The very large crude carrier passed the strait on March 14th. While its AIS was off about 10 days after loading Saudi crude, the tanker passed the choke point after Iran authorized safe transit for two LPG carriers bound for India over the weekend. There are at least three more laden Dynacom-operated tankers in the Middle East Gulf awaiting safe passage. I'm going to assume that the Greeks are going to run those ships through. But we're going to talk about more passages here for ships in a minute. First, I want to go to the latest update out by the Joint Maritime Information Center. So according to JITMIC, we are still at a critical level here. We have 20 confirmed incidences involving shipping since March 1st, none over the past 24 hours, and 3 vessels were observed making transit through the Strait of Hormuz. That's 135 ships under the usual average, and we're still seeing widespread disruptions in terms of global navigation system. Here are the stats for the past week through the Strait of Hormuz. 1 ship on 9 March, 7 on 10 March, 1 on 11 March, up to 5 on 12, down to 1 on 13, and then 14, 2, and then finally on the 15th of March, 3 vessels. But of those, only 3 of all those total vessels were.
So we got traffic, we got movement. It's not really ramping up, but indeed it's happening. So it's an important thing to recognize and observe. Now, the rockets went to 0 2 days ago. Yesterday, a few up, but it's important to give those some context. And here's one comment saying either Iran is holding back capacity in order to threaten Hormuz and Gulf energy production, or they're running out of the capability to do so. And here's a little bit of the types of disinformation we're hearing about. This is, again, related to Hormuz. These should have been the other way around, but that's okay. Here we see that Trump said we don't even know if there's mines in there. Not sure. It has been the drone boats. Proves my point. Everything that was mentioned about mines was hype. Again, it's a fog of war situation, very difficult to get a sense of the news and what's going on. Now, this makes one of the situations about this war so interesting, is that because it is a air war, there are no real embedded journalists anywhere, right? We don't really see many embedded journalists. We don't really see any, because they're usually with the ground troops. The only journalists we have seen in Iran, of course, are from CNN and the people who've been invited by the regime. We get some social media from the Gulf states, but not too much. And then the only news source we really have that is regularly producing stuff is coming from Israel. And we all know that Israel's credibility in many ways is in the tank, and no one really has that much confidence in what you're seeing from Israel is true. I think both allies of Israel and opponents of Israel think the same, that hard to really trust what's going on out of their newspapers. Don't forget, those newspapers were also some of the firsts that called the election to Biden. I'll never forget that, of course. back in 2020. But here's Victor Davis Hanson on what he thinks is the big story around this war. And he breaks it down again. I think he's been one of the best commentators, people commenting on this war. And he breaks it all down to exactly what I just said about the coverage feeling missing, that there's parts of the coverage of this war that are just not there, and that it's really hard to see through what's missing because of, logistically, it's him who made this point that the war being fought from the air by America, because the pilots don't really see anyone. There's no reporters. They go and they do their sorties and they drop their bombs and they come back, and they're not really talking to anyone. They don't have to make a case. So one of the big problems indeed is that you've got this situation where we're all trying to make sense of what's going on based on what people are saying on the internet, and that information is just lacking. So that's why, one of the reasons why you have a lot of this confusion going on. He goes on to talk about war unity, and war unity being one of the big questions here. When the 1991 Iran war happened, everyone was kind of for it, or Iraq war in the original Desert Storm. There was a lot of unity. It brought a lot of people together. But he talks here about the just how surreal it is that you've got all of this, I guess, winning compared to what happened in 1991 in terms of, it's way fewer casualties from the United States, way more effectiveness when it comes to how quickly, the original Persian Gulf War against Saddam Hussein was 40-something days. We're only at day 17, I guess, here. Relative to 1991, much more successful. But he puts these things together, no unity this time, everyone thinking Trump's losing, everyone thinks America's losing. Not everyone, but a whole contingent of folks. But without the war coverage there, without real comment and people covering this with access, you're left with the war of social media and narratives. And that's really where he talks about how surreal this war is getting, that it is filled with hallucinations and all this stuff. And he underlines these hallucinations. Let me know if the audio is, oh no, it's definitely not coming through here. Totally on the wrong page. I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare so that you get it correctly. So here's Victor Davis Hanson talking about this surreal war.
They actually are sympathizing with the enemy. If you think I'm crazy, there was a protest out in New York where we had resident aliens, students here on student visa, naturalized citizens, and what were they screaming? Shame on the United States. Why we're at war, and who were they protesting on behalf of? Iran, the Hezbollah people, terrorists, and the Hamas terrorists. And so this is a very bizarre thing. And in addition to that, we've got the element of anti-Semitism, where we have the Democratic Party now, its base is just unavowedly anti-Semitic. And I'll just make a casual observation. I will predict that you will not have a Jewish American presidential candidate, or vice presidential candidate for the foreseeable future. It is impossible to nominate anybody with a Jewish background on a national ticket in the Democratic Party. And you can see that as the Democrats look at this war. They have bought hook, line, and sinker the idea that Benjamin Netanyahu is pulling the strings of the Donald Trump puppet, and tiny Israel is getting into this war, despite the fact that all 7 prior presidents of Trump himself said on the record that Iran would not get a nuclear weapon on its watch, and that they would take measures to ensure that it didn't, and didn't for the future. None of them did that. None of them did that. And so when you look at the first Gulf War, it was 42 days, but only 4 days were on the ground. It was a magnificent victory, but 300 people were killed. We've lost about 14, 13 casualty fatalities. 300. That was considered amazing at the time. And they overran the country, but it took 42 days to disable it. And they left Saddam Hussein in power, and they had to go back. And so that was considered a stellar success. But this is a much more dramatic victory. I mean, we've only been here 2 weeks, and a much more formidable enemy is in shambles, and we're left with just three alternatives. Either the regime is going to be replaced now or in the next few weeks as the people come out of their homes and see what their country is like and what the theocracy caused and what it did to them, or there's going to be some Venezuelan solution with a strong man who will come forward. Or maybe that won't happen at all, and the United States, under political pressure, will stop. But if it stops, they have destroyed the Iranian military and its nuclear and missile program for years. So this was all preferable to the situation pre-war, in which Iran still was working on the bomb, still had 3,000 missiles and more drones, and was boasting that it was going to, at any time it wanted, close the Straits of Hormuz. And they've tried it, and they will not be successful. Put it all together, this is a surreal war. What is actually happening is not being reported, and there's an alternate reality that's been constructed by the left that sees this war as politically advantageous to its agenda to recapture power in the United States. If it convince us, the American people, that A, we're losing, B, we may deserve to lose, C, it's all Donald Trump's fault, and this war will be beneficial in denying him the Republican majorities in Congress in about 8 months. Thank you very much. This is Victor.
And honestly, this is what I'm seeing. This is exactly what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the same COVID people, the same Trump doesn't have a plan. He's an idiot. He's under Netanyahu's thumb and all of these things. And so I continue to see it this way. I could be wrong. We are definitely seeing a lack of on-the-ground reporting. So the only thing we can really analyze is the psychological space. That's it. That's all we have information on. We can look at what people are fighting about, why they're fighting about it online, and where their talking points are coming from. That's the best we have. And I don't have to hallucinate any type of scenario to see it exactly as this. This is what we've seen before. This has been the method to the madness for a long time. The environment is completely saturated with fake news. Here, John Conrad says the following: "You have no idea the number of doomsday posts on my shipping feeds. Look, you can call me a Trump whatever. You can't say what you can't say is that I was in favor of this war. I'm on record saying for years that we should bulldoze CENTCOM to prevent another Middle East war. For years, I've been posting about the difficulties of securing choke points, especially this choke point. I was the first major promoter of a new battleship because I thought destroyers weren't big enough for the job. I have probably posted more than just about anyone about how crappy our littoral combat ships are and troubles with the Minesweeper modules. I know about deep strategy and tactical problems the MSM hasn't even found yet. I was the first to go on a major podcast and say the Strait can't reopen without Marines. I said from day one the Allies can't help us. Was the first here to call out the insurance problem and explain why ship owners won't risk their lives. I am pissed off right now that the Navy still can't get 5 U.S. merchant marine ships out. Don't want to toot my own horn, but I honestly don't know anyone who was more skeptical and accurate earlier than me. And anyone who knows me well will tell you I can't sit and watch a shit show without screaming at admirals from the rooftop about their screw-ups. But my lord, more than half my feed is consumed with doomerism. Only 200 casualties and 16 ship attacks in 16 days. That's way lower than I dreamed was possible. With zero help from any allies besides Israel, unfathomable a year ago. To eliminate Iran as a threat from the map, that's a win. That's a win if casualties double and it takes another 16 days to reopen the strait. Now, I'm not saying the entire excursion can't still fall off the rails and crash into the side of an explosive depot. I'm not saying we are in clear for the months of closure resulting in a massive famine. This is war. Lots can go wrong. But my goodness, to say this operation is already lost and Trump is spewing lies to cover up the truth about what's happening, to say Iran is now full control of the strait, to say all our allies have turned their backs on us fully, that's pure doomsday fiction. No way am I popping a champagne cork, but cautious optimism is warranted. P.S. Anyone who thinks 16 days is catastrophic doesn't know shipping. It's bad, yes, but not catastrophic yet. The COVID port congestion crisis lasted 2 years. The Red Sea crisis has been 2 years and running. I'm very concerned, and the tanker market is extremely tight. Thanks for nothing, IMOHQ, but have some degree of patience, please. And that's how I'm seeing it right now. Same Cernovich saying the same thing right here. 60 Minutes, of course, out the fake news. Right from what you heard from Victor David Hansen, of course it's the usual suspects. Of course it's the legacy fake news NPC media. Trump was unprepared. They went into the war prepared for certain threats like missiles. They didn't go into the war prepared for threats like drones. They didn't think of drones. Are you retarded? They didn't think of drones like it's the first time they ever heard of drones. Give me a break. Cernovich says, yes, they did. My goodness. You can think the Iran war was not the best idea, in my view, without lying. Everyone knows there were these tactics. Why lie about it? Indeed, why lie about it? The lying should tell us what we need to know, right? This is the kind of lie you see, right? Iran's parliament speaker, security in the Strait of Hormuz will never be the same. You get that this guy here saying it's the Epstein files prove that the U.S. is on a leash for Israel and that Trump is lying several times a day out of desperation. This is crazy stuff. And then you get, of course, Taylor Lorenz back in the news. Our lame-ass government is tweeting chat GPT memes and AI slopaganda while the Houthis are releasing the hardest videos you've ever seen. Hardest videos you've ever seen. Ashley Rinsberg said, you have to ask what's really going on when a former New York Times WAPO tech reporter is promoting wartime propaganda of a U.S. enemy. And that's why you had Trump come out and say exactly what I said yesterday, exactly what the real battlefield is. As far as we're concerned in America, it's all psychological. It's all media relations. Iran has been known as a master of media manipulation and public relations. Public relations, of course, don't forget, Edward Bernays recast that. He originally called it propaganda. He invented the term public relations to hide that it was propaganda. They are militarily ineffective and weak, but are really good at feeding the very appreciative fake news, false information. Now AI has become another disinformation weapon that Iran uses quite well, considering they are being annihilated by the day. They showed phony kamikaze boats shooting at various ships at sea, which looks wonderful, powerful, and vicious, but these boats don't exist. It's all false information to show how tough their already defeated military is. Now, I'm not unaware that Trump is also amazing at propaganda, right? So, and media manipulation. That's why he's president. He's a media manipulator. That's exactly why he's president. He's one of the greatest media manipulators you've ever seen. You don't get to keep your own opinion if Donald Trump starts speaking. He will polarize you to one side or the other. You can't exist in a vacuum when his opinions enter the room. They distort your opinion, my opinion, everyone's opinion. That's his superpower. It's bringing attention to his point of view and then splitting everyone else's point of view down, marked by what his point of view was. So, don't think that I'm reading this. I'm reading it as if Donald Trump is here telling us the truth. That's not what I think is happening. He's telling you what he wants you to end up thinking, and usually you're mostly aligned with what he's thinking, or at least many people are. But he's definitely playing you. Right now, what's the point of the playing? It's not to trick you. It's because we're fighting a psychological war. And the psychological component is the important component. To show you how tough their already defeated military is, the 5 U.S. refueling planes that were supposedly struck down and badly damaged, according to the Wall Street Journal's false reporting and others, are all in service with the exception of one, which will soon be flying the skies. Buildings and ships that are shown to be on fire are not. It's fake news generated by AI. For instance, Iran, working in close coordination with the fake news media, shows our great USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, one of the largest and most prestigious ships in the world, burning uncontrollably in the ocean. Not only was it not burning, it was not even shot at. Iran knows better than to do that. The story was knowingly fake, and in a certain way, you can say that those media outlets that generated it should have been brought up on charges of treason for the dissemination of false information. The fact is, Iran is being decimated, and the only battles they win are those that they create through AI and are distributed by corrupt media outlets. The radical left-wing press knows this full well, but continues to go forward with false stories and lies. That's why the approval rating is so low, and I can win a presidential election in a landslide, getting only 5% positive press. They have no credibility. I am so thrilled to see Brandon Carr, the chairman of the FCC, looking into licenses of some of these corrupt and highly unpatriotic news organizations. They get billions of dollars of free American airwaves and use it to perpetuate lies. Both the news and almost all their shows, including the late night morons who get gigantic salaries for horrible ratings and never get, as I used to say, The Apprentice fired. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Again, my wish for the FCC is that he just gets rid of over-the-air television. I mean, honestly, what do we need over-the-air television for anymore? Just the boomers? Who cares? Get rid of it. Just totally eliminate it. They don't need it. Where the television is broadcast, the entire VHF bandwidth is the beachfront of bandwidth. Get them off. Who cares about the sludge media? If people want to see media, get the internet. Put internet over that channel. They can have internet channels then, and that'll be fine. But I'm sorry, the Rabbit Ears TV and the over-the-air feeds of those pathetic 5 or 6 channels aren't worth it anymore. And look at the trouble it causes. I say just tell Brandon Carr, don't regulate it, get rid of it. Just tell them to get out of there. That bandwidth is being used for something better than Jimmy Kimmel. And so we would love for that to happen. I think it will one day. Now, this is funny. The most convincing argument I've read recently that the Pentagon knows what it is doing is from Al Jazeera. Again, we don't have to take all of these media just because it confirms your bias and all that, but it just is showing you what's happening in the media landscape. There is a huge vacuum, and it is being filled by all kinds of speculation and all kinds of psychological operations, and that's the biggest thing we know about this war is the psychological operation that's going on. And indeed, when you stop and think about what's happening, when you think about the Epstein files thing, this is why I predict Trump is going to steer everyone back to the Epstein files once this Iran war is done. I'd say by May, you're going to be hearing about Epstein files, in particular the 9/11 component. If I'm right, that's what you're going to see. I believe that the statue of Trump and Epstein that came out last week in the Washington Mall is part of it. I don't know if they put it there, but the only reason why people are ever interested in Epstein is because there's a chance that the walls are closing in on Trump and they can get Trump now. It's another get Trump situation. And if there's no get Trump at the end of the rainbow, if there's no pot of get Trump gold on St. Patrick's Day, they don't want anything to do with it. They're not interested. And if you look at any of the search histories when it comes to Epstein stuff and the Iran war, it had already cratered. Once there were no more chances of getting Trump, once the dopamine hit didn't come, that Trump was going to get caught up in the Epstein stuff, no one was interested. When they found out it was a Democrat op, no one was interested. But it's not just a Democrat op. Don't forget that there is this huge divide right now amongst MAGA people. And the MAGA divide can almost be traced directly to Epstein file stuff as well. Adam Townsend went hard yesterday on all this stuff. It's hilarious because Steve Bannon was for years peddling the Epstein stuff and how corrupt our government is, just for everyone to find out that he was actually close with the guy. Now, not even one mention about Epstein. Adam Townsend says, yep, just like Biden had an entire enabling infrastructure to insulate him from any revelations or interrogations of his cognitive health, such as CNN, MSNBC. Biden's mental decline is not true. It's a conspiracy theory. Bannon also has the same schema of enabling infrastructure for MAGA, Reuters, Bill Nye, and the podcast cabal. He goes further. Steve Bannon is everything they said Reid Hoffman is. and wondering why no one is going after it. Christopher Rufo, and I did weirdly, I did the same. I saw Candace had a huge audience last night, and I tuned in. I mean, it's wrestling. It's maybe entertaining. I love the Bridget Macron entertainment, but a lot of this stuff is absolutely going off the deep end. Christopher Rufo says, I listened to an hour of Candace Owens, and if you can't figure out that she's pushing unadulterated insanity, that's a you problem. The frankest spellcasters did not murder Charlie Kirk to set up a Manchurian candidate wife to become president. And, it, look, if you can consume it as entertainment, fine. But it shouldn't be consumed as like, this is what's happening in the world right now. It shouldn't be. I think Candace is a very interesting person. She seems really nice, a good mom. I'm a fan. But I'm a fan of entertainment personalities, right? So you can see the psychological component here and what's going on with all of this confusion. And when you think about how this confusion is settling in, you start to realize that the fight is, again, more about the economics behind all of this than it is necessarily about the hot war. The economics end up creating these circumstances that really start to tell us that we're not dealing with nation states. We're not dealing with anything like that. We're dealing with these little cabals of self-interested people, of self-interested groups, of self-interested parties. It's much more about networks. It's much more about economic connections and how people make money and all of these things. And Walter Kern underlined that, he said, I have a friend in the security world, high in the security world, who speaks of power centers rather than governments or nations, and seems to feel that the world is more a set of rival and allied ventures than a game of risk in the old sense. I'm coming around to this idea. Indeed, thinking of this as like a London thing or a City of London or a British Empire thing, it kind of muddies the waters or an American Empire thing or a Chinese thing or a Muslim thing or a Jewish thing. It kind of muddies the waters because all of these components are just as divided. Israel is just as divided as America. UK is divided. All of these places have their divisions. The better way to look at it, indeed, is these different cabals and networks. And Balaji says exactly that. Networks are a better mental model than states. Within a state, there are many networks, from ideological groupings to digital communities. They aren't internally homogenous. Between states, like countries themselves, belong to networks, multilateral fora like ASEAN or WEF. China is the closest exemption to the rule, perhaps the most internally homogenous large state, and least globally dependent on others. But even China isn't fully an exception if you look closely. All these types of informal networks are becoming more important relative to formal states as the 20th century ends and the internet century begins. And that's why you can really boil this down, again, to what we're seeing from the Promethean Action story. Promethean Action probably has the best coverage of all of this stuff. And here we saw Susan Kokinda highlighting what she sees in this whole universe, and I will play her recent conclusions because I think, again, she has it
on Israel. Second, Russia's identification of Britain as the obstacle to peace. And third, what Russia and China didn't do in the UN Security Council and what it means. So let's start with what the president actually told us this week. Because in the same 7 days, Donald Trump drew a line on the record in his own words, separating American objectives from the agendas of two of the empire's most important instruments. And most people missed it because they were watching two different stories instead of one. So on Ukraine, you already heard what he told NBC. Putin is willing to make a deal. Zelensky is the obstacle. But there's a second quote from that same interview that is just as important. When Zelensky offered to help the United States intercept Iranian drones, Trump's response was immediate. Zelensky is the last person we need help from. Let that land. The man whose war the entire transatlantic establishment has demanded America fund, arm, and defend at any cost, Trump just told you he's the last person whose help he wants. Now turn to Iran. In the same week at Joint Base Andrews, a reporter asked the president directly whether American objectives in Iran are the same as Israel's. And here's what the president said.
Are you speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu? And are your objectives the same in terms of ending the war?
They might be a little different, I guess. You know, they're a different country than we are.
Then Defense Secretary Hegseth said the same thing. When asked about Israel striking Iranian oil facilities, which was not a stated American objective, Hegseth said,
well, I would just state by saying Israel's been a really strong partner in this effort. Where they have different objectives, they've pursued them. Ultimately, we've stayed focused on ours.
So, on two different fronts, Ukraine and Iran, the U.S. is pursuing its own objectives. On Ukraine, Trump is saying that Putin is the reasonable party and Zelensky is the obstacle. On Iran, Trump is telling Netanyahu, whose war aims include permanent regime change and an indefinite timeline, that America has different objectives. And President Trump has already acted on that difference, sending Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to Israel after they bombed an oil refinery to tell Israel to stop hitting domestic economic targets. The U.S. wants a stable Iran with a functioning economy when the fighting is over. These are not mixed messages. This is a president refusing on both.
And that pattern would be confirmed entirely by what we saw from Karg Island, of course. Trump wants the oil, just like Venezuela, to go to the people, because you can't have the Iranian or the Iraqi situation from the war where they fired everyone. Everyone knew that was the worst thing they did in the 2003 Iraq war when they told everyone, you're all fired, don't come back to work tomorrow. They should have just taken Saddam out and said, everyone, everything's the same, come back to work tomorrow, there'll be a new leader. But they decided to destroy the entire state apparatus and start from scratch, which is where you get ISIS and all this trouble. And of course, I know American was involved in it and blah, blah, blah. But that was one of the major problems. Here, seeing that they want the commercial base of Iran to be in place is really important. The foundation is there for the people to rebuild.
Both fronts to be managed by the empire's pawns. And Russia just gave the empire a name. But before I get to that, if you're finding this kind of analysis, that is the real architecture behind the headlines, useful, then you need to be subscribed to Promethean Action's free newsletter. We've been tracking the Imperial Great Game for decades, and right now, that work has never mattered more. So use the link in the description to sign up for our newsletter. So while President Trump was identifying Zelensky as the obstacle to peace, the Russian Foreign Ministry took it a step higher. On March 10th, British Storm Shadow missiles struck a civilian district of Bryansk in Russia. 7 people killed, dozens were wounded. Russia's foreign ministry did not issue a generic condemnation of Western aggression. They named the British directly. They said, "It is evident that Britain has become deeply entangled in geopolitical games, seeking to strengthen its status as the informal leader of European hawks on the Ukrainian track and as Russia's irreconcilable adversary." And then they accused Britain of sabotaging the American-led peace process. We have also noted that British weapons were used at a time when political and diplomatic efforts to settle the Ukrainian crisis in the trilateral Russia-US-Ukraine format are intensifying. The obvious goal of London and other Western capitals is to stage a large-scale provocation involving civilian casualties in order to derail the peace process and escalate hostilities. Russia is naming Britain by name. Chatham House, the empire's premier foreign policy think tank, came out and bluntly admitted it with the headline, "Europe is helping Ukraine resist a U.S. push for peace at any price." Britain's own brain trust has stated its mission openly: prevent the President of the United States from ending this war. Then look at what Zelensky did in the same week. He threatened the life of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a sitting EU head of state. Zelensky told a government meeting that he would give Orban's address to Ukrainian soldiers so they could, in his words, call him and speak with him in their own language. This was so outrageous that even the European Union had to denounce Zelensky, stating that the type of language used yesterday by President Zelensky is not acceptable. There must be no threats against EU member states. And even Orban's main political opponent in Hungary, who is running against him in next month's elections, demanded that Zelensky apologize to all Hungarian citizens. Think about what you just witnessed. The empire's primary instrument in Europe, the leader it spent 3 years portraying as a heroic defender of Western democracy, threatening to have a NATO ally's head of government killed, and the empire's own European Union institutions had to publicly repudiate him. Britain is now named as the opponent of peace. Zelensky is increasingly isolated even within his own alliance. Now put that in context.
So indeed, you can see Russia and China. Zelensky threatens, President Trump clarifies. The emerging New World Order, she argues that the US, Russia, and China are converging on shared interests, such as stabilizing energy markets by lifting Russian oil sanctions temporarily, dismantling the British-led empire system of manufactured permanent conflicts. And indeed, this has been the frame we've been using here for a long time. I've been saying that what we saw from the US Civil War, from all of this divide and conquer, Shia, Sunni, Jewish, all of these things have been theater in order to maintain this global conflict system, to maintain the extractive colonial model. And here you can already see that Trump going after NATO yesterday. Everyone's saying, oh, Trump got rebuked from his allies for not helping in the Strait of Hormuz. He got rebuked. Oh, my goodness. That's not what I saw, right? Trump is beginning the process of creating shared responsibility for critical trade routes and partnerships economically, which will help establish permanent peace and keep communications going between important nations. They will also lessen the threat of war in the future. The smart countries will take the deal and benefit. It's the paradigm shift of mutual respect, and I think China will eventually be on board. Regional responsibility. All this stuff about NATO, Trump couldn't get a coalition. John Conrad says, during the entirety of the Red Sea operation closure, all of NATO couldn't muster more than 3 warships at a time, you donut hole. An entire German task force sailed around Africa to avoid the Houthis. They are demonstrably weak, and Trump is exposing that fact. That's all he's doing. And by them not coming, Trump reminds everyone here, he'll remember, right? So this is what he says. He'll remember. Let me know if the audio is coming through.
Done a great job. And when we want to know, do you have any minesweepers? Well, would rather not get involved, sir. I said, you mean for 40 years we're protecting you and you don't want to get involved in something that is very minor? Very few shots going to be taken because they don't have many shots left. But they said, would rather not get involved. I just want the fake news media and everybody else to remember that was said, because I've been a big critic of all of the protecting of countries, because I know that we'll protect them, and if we ever needed help, they won't be there for us. I've just known that for a long period of time, just like I knew about the Strait, that it would be a weapon.
So again, this Trump doesn't know. I mean, you're talking about a New York City real estate guy. You think he's naive? You think this guy is just naive and doesn't understand? And what would people think? He's existed in adversarial environments for his entire life. And here we can see that NATO is not our friend, and it's got to go. It's a relic of the old world. They were given the opportunity to save face. My speculation is the same, that we'll be leaving at NATO relatively soon. And also thoughts and prayers, everyone, please, to Susie Wiles here, his chief of staff. She's been diagnosed with breast cancer. Hopefully she's going to be okay. Trump, during this press conference, took time to say that she'll get treated in the White House, and hopefully things work out for her. Everyone says she's really important. I've never met her, but people say she's great. And if she's got cancer, very, very sad to hear. But here's what we know, right? All these allies. Here's Amjad Taha from UAE saying this is a shameful moment in Western history. Leaders standing like frightened cowards before the Islamist jihadist rats ruling Iran. Starmer in Britain, the German chancellor, they want the oil, the gas, the markets. But when it comes to defending it, silence, cowardice, excuses. At the same time, they rush to talk with the Islamic regime in Iran. So let's be clear, zero friendship, zero loyalty, zero respect for their own interests or for the civilization they claim to defend. Do not speak to us again about friendship. Do not lecture the world about freedom. We watched you stand against our closest ally, America, while hoping the Islamist regime in Iran wins this confrontation. Which is why I've been telling you that the World War III allies that Trump has, that America has, are Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, Japan, and South Korea. The rest of them can pound cement because they're losers anyway and they can't help. And if America leaves all of these places, so what? So what? Let them live with what they did. We don't need to defend them. We don't need to protect them. We don't need to do anything like that. Trump was also taking time yesterday to talk about these allies, saying he would remember what they did and that it was going to be a problem. He's already got Japan moving over, right? Japan, this was a while ago. They're going to have all of their oil coming from America fairly soon. Big change in that with Japan. That's why it's one of our most important allies. Just like NATO, getting out of NATO, you can start to see the recalibrations. This is not a forever war. This is America changing how it reacts and interacts with the world. Trump called out Germany, South Korea, and Japan for not willing to help in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Japan and South Korea are different. Only if China comes can they come as well. They've got to keep a balance of ships out there. Lots of people have been talking about that. So Japan and South Korea are not really in the same boat as Germany here, but what War Clandestine is picking up on is these are the places where America has the most amount of foreign troop positioning. I think you're going to see an end to this. What do these nations have in common? They are where we have the largest standing military presence outside the US. I think Trump is not just setting up a withdrawal from NATO. I think he's setting up a withdrawal from our military presence around the globe and will eventually begin the process of consolidating US military presence to the Western Hemisphere once we are done with Iran and the war in Ukraine is over. I think that's true. I think this is what I predict as well. I think the end goal is normalized relations with Russia and China, and thus the permanent end to the Cold War that never really ended. This is only possible by removing US military presence off of China and Russia's doorstep, as well as ending Russian Chinese meddling in our hemisphere via places like Venezuela and Cuba, which is already happening. What if the US, Russia, and China just agreed to stop the espionage, weapons of mass destruction, proxy wars, and meddling in each other's regions? What if the superpowers were on the same side instead of fighting against each other? It's possible, and things seem to be inching in that direction. Russia and China are losing their influence in the Western Hemisphere, and Trump is posturing like he is going to remove our presence in the Eastern Hemisphere. I think we are witnessing a restructuring of the global order, and the global alliances as we know them are about to shift dramatically. This is what I'm seeing. I don't believe I need to hallucinate anything to see this. To me, all of the facts on the ground look like this. I don't need to imagine that we're under a Jewish conspiracy to run the world and blackmail America into doing what they want. What I'm seeing here now, there's plenty of blackmail to go around. Blackmail is a real thing. It's definitely happening. But what I'm seeing here are sovereign nations between China, Russia, and America talking, I think, de-escalating things like we saw with the UN. Russia and China are not backing Iran. This is not going to be escalated down those avenues. It looks like we are seeing a change in military posture, a change in aggression, who allies are, and who the different belligerents in World War III are. We're actually starting to see very clearly who the belligerents in World War III are. It looks much more like an English civil war, an English-speaking civil war. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing an English world civil war taking place between the UK, between Australia, Canada, all of these places, South Africa being a great example. We're seeing a civil war amongst English-speaking nations, and the rest of the world is going to let the UK and the English-speaking world and America fight it out, and Russia and China are backing away from it. This is the same type of scenario we saw with the actual American Civil War back in the 1860s. Because, and again, I've been drawing all kinds of attention to that. The way that war was ultimately decided, with the North winning against the South, was really decided by Russia, because Russia threatening to support Lincoln meant that the English Civil War, which is what the US Civil War really was, the United Kingdom was funding all of this bullshit with the Confederates and stoking up all of the animosity between the two belligerents. And from there, you end up getting what we all recognize as the US Civil War. That's why the US Civil War was prosecuted from Canada. The Canadians were with the Confederates years ago. That's why you had battles in St. Albans, Vermont, for example. They entered the Union northern states via Canada because the British did not want the United States to be as powerful as they were becoming. And we never really left that framework. And the money and everything that came around from the British system, from this financial system, is what you are still seeing getting dismantled today. It's why I believe that energy will continue to flow around the world. The Strait of Hormuz is not going to turn into mass famine. It's not going to turn into economic calamity. If Trump wanted a forever war and wanted to escalate things and create this Armageddon, then he would be bombing the Chinese oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. You'd be putting China in an impossible situation. He's not doing that. He's letting the Chinese ships pass. He's degrading the capacity of the state of Iran, because the state of Iran, I think, was operating under the guidance of this system, the forever war, the perpetual psychological operation, the perpetual fake prison of two ideas, the perpetual binaries of Islam and Jewish and Christian, and all of these things that people just got sucked into for years, when the truth is it's really a financial system that we're trying to maintain. That's why you had all of these fights. And that's why when Ben Rickard says this, people think power is loud. It isn't. It's deciding who gets financed, what they pay for it, and what they believe about it afterward. Once you control the cost of money and the story around it, behavior flows automatically. And when behavior is predictable, control is already complete. It's what I've been saying is what happened with the Federal Reserve 13 years ago. This is exactly what happened. Once you control people's wants and fears, you control reality. You control what they think. You can control what they desire. We are not, any of us, logical people. If we were logical, we would already be on a Bitcoin standard. We would have already shed the fake Federal Reserve, but we're not logical. We align with power systems. We align with aesthetics. We align with the things that we want. We align with the things that we're afraid of. And that is what helps create reality. And if I knew what I know about Bitcoin now, back when the Federal Reserve was being created on Jekyll Island, I could have easily said, okay, yeah, with a couple of families, with 13 people or whatever, I can definitely control the world if I can control money. It's not that hard. Once you understand that, once you understand that people align with power systems more than they align with logic, then you start to understand what's going on. And now that it is St. Patrick's Day, don't forget, it's St. Patrick's Day, right? What was St. Patrick known for? St. Patrick was known for driving the snakes out of Ireland, right? That's what he was known for. He was known for driving the snakes out of Ireland. And that's why Secretary Bessent had yesterday said Iran was the head of the snake of global terrorism. There are Iranian Guard members in Venezuela. There's the Hezbollah in Colombia. They're interacting with Cuba. Everywhere there is chaos and terrorism, mayhem, it is Iran. And Iran was just an extension of this British financial system. Again, don't think of it in terms of nationalism. It is one of these networks. It is one of these ventures. It's one of these private interests that was going around the world and creating all of this delusion. And so just like St. Patrick drove the snakes out, that's what is happening right now. We're driving the snakes out that create these binaries, these fake prisons, these forever wars, these perpetual conflicts. It's not about sovereign nations like China, Russia, and America aligning on things like energy. It's why when you see Secretary Bessent here make guarantees about the energy stability of the world, he's really talking about rebuilding the world under a new financial system, not about prosecuting a forever escalation war.
To their borders. And, Brian, Iran was the head of the snake for global terrorism everywhere. Whether it was through their proxies or there were Iranian Guard members in Venezuela. There's Hezbollah in Colombia. They're interacting with Cuba. Everywhere that there is chaos and terrorist mayhem, it is Iran. So this is a generational opportunity to end this.
I think the risk and the fear that people I've spoken to on and off the record, the risk is that while the head of the snake in Tehran may have been cut off, there are IRCG bosses that have gotten personally very wealthy. They run little fiefdoms. They're rich off of control. And there's nothing to stop them from having a rocket-powered missile shooting it at a supertanker. Do we know as a nation who right now we are technically fighting? Because between the Houthis in the Red Sea, and I know the Department of War.
Well, I didn't realize you didn't answer the thing, but it's exactly why when you look at the scenario with Cuba, why you can see all of these dominoes falling at once. We're really right back to World War I and the Russian Revolution and those fake prisons of two ideas, the communist thing. All of that is what's coming back to the forefront. We're prosecuting the wars we should have prosecuted. The real war in World War I should have been about what was going on in Russia, how are they creating this revolution, who's involved in the finance of all of this, who's involved in all of these things. And we would have seen very quickly that the Federal Reserve and the troubles in Russia were all related. The creation of the Federal Reserve and all of those stories at the same time were that relationship coming through. That's why when you think about the belligerents in World War III and you start to see that, they're calling Trump they're calling him a authoritarian, right? He's authoritarian. And you think about what's actually changing, and you think about who out there is behaving this way and what the power centers really are. Let me find, I had a really good one here. Where did it go? Yeah. You see, right? Imagine having TDS so bad that you unironically tweet that overthrowing Maduro, Khomeini, and the Cuban fella, 3 literal dictators, is a worst case scenario for authoritarianism. Just think about this for a second. Think about what you're being told. If the Ben Rhodes stuff is connecting with you, right, that it's dangerous, that what Trump is doing is crazy, he's not planning, you're just listening to Rupar's fake news, right? This is another Rupar, right? We got more Rupars. We know from the beginning, I don't believe that I'll have the honor of that's a big honor, taking Cuba in some form. I think I can do anything I want with it. If you know the truth and you start hearing Rupars again, right? Rupar's the fella who actually created the Charlottesville hoax. You start to understand that this psychological component is right back to the old world of Marxism, and we're running the whole thing backwards. We're running everything back in time. And here we see that with the changes that are going on, just start to think of what we're on the cusp of. Not a forever war, something else. What if, sorry if I'm spoiling the party, what if America's tyrannical enemies all feel themselves on the run? What if it's working? What if Trump's basic foreign policy strategy, not every element, and you may reasonably argue that some significant mistakes are being made, is overall turning into a massively successful surge in American influence? What if the radical regimes, whether outright Marxists like Venezuela and Cuba or hybrid Marxist Islamists like Iran, are either in retreat or desperately trying to reform from within to avoid that fate? I try not to comment on America's domestic politics. It isn't my place, and I frankly don't know enough. But on the world stage, it's starting to look like Trump may have cut through the dumbest, oldest assumptions on foreign policy Brahmins and delivered through sheer grim determination a serious new direction for American policy. Yes, it may all go to the dogs from Iran to Venezuela. It could all still fail. We're going through history for the first time, as it were. We don't know how the story ends, but the data points are piling up that suggests it's possible this could all succeed. What if China's alliance system breaks down, the Middle East emerges in a year or 2, or perhaps 10, more stable and less radical than it is now? Venezuela begins to rebuild from the ruins of Chavezism, And even the resilient little Cuba begins to reconsider its commitment to eternal poverty and dictatorship. What then? And indeed, it looks like we're going to get perestroika in Cuba. The Cuban dictatorship has announced perestroika on national television, the same death decree that accelerated the collapse of the Soviet Union. The measures will be as follows: allowing Cuban exiles without effective residency in Cuba to participate in or own private companies in Cuba. Cuban exiles can partner with Cuban private companies through their businesses. This includes not only small businesses, but also infrastructure and large-scale enterprises. Participation of Cuban exiles in the country's financial and banking system. Cuban participation in the business and financial sectors is now open. Cuban exiles will be able to open foreign currency bank accounts in Cuban banks. Regarding land-related businesses, usufruct rights will be granted. Cuban exiles will be able to establish alliances with Cuban state or private entities. All too little, too late? I don't think so. I think they're going to be able to drag Cuba out of this. We're seeing indeed that this plan is going to allow all kinds of activity. The move signals one of the biggest economic openings in decades. You're seeing all of this happen at once. Exactly at the same time that we're seeing Trump talk about the Federal Reserve, right? So again, we're seeing this war on communism. We're seeing this war on the Federal Reserve and the financial systems and allies that resulted from the Federal Reserve back then. That's why Trump is talking again about subordinating the Federal Reserve, as he did yesterday, calling for his emergency Fed cut. Again, he's putting the Fed on notice. He's got, I don't know how many weeks before he's in charge. We're about a month, a little under 2 months, I think, before Trump has subordinated the Federal Reserve to Scott Bessent. He's calling for emergency Fed cut. He says that cuts should happen right now and wants a special meeting to do it. Here is what is actually going on. Trump thinks the financial system is more fragile than the public is being told, and he wants liquidity before that fragility shows up in a way nobody can spin. He is demanding emergency-style cuts at the exact moment the usual clean justification for cuts is still compromised by war pressure and higher energy risk. That means the thing driving him is a hierarchy of threats judgment. In his mind, the bigger danger now is fracture, credit stress, refinancing pain, asset weakness, political instability, a market that starts losing smoothness and then suddenly loses more than smoothness. The emergency tone gives that away. This is about who gets to decide when the monetary machine admits weakness. The normal ritual says stress must wait its turn. Meetings happen on schedule. Language is managed. Cuts arrive through ceremony. Trump is rejecting the ritual because he thinks the ritual is now too slow for the pressure building underneath it. This is why the demand sounds like a breach. It is a breach. He is trying to grab the steering wheel before the road failure becomes visible. This is the more important one. That's why keeping oil flowing is so important. That's why this economic fight, the subordination of the Federal Reserve to the Treasury, the reemergence of the American Republic and the American system is the most important thing. Power aligns with a new financial system. If you get paid, if you make money with this new system, it will create the reality that the Federal Reserve created 113 years ago. It's going to define people's wants. It's going to define people's fears. And once you do that, you're going to actually change all of the incentive structures behind nation states, wars, energy, the markets, who gets paid, how they get paid, why they get paid. And that is what is happening. Right now, we had a system where the brainwashers made a lot of money because fiat is words. And if words are the system, then that's why we can't tell where all the money is going. We can't tell people's incentives. That's why everything becomes so obscure and convoluted and difficult and opaque. And indeed, the pressure is no longer just rhetorical. The monetary priesthood itself is under attack. The legal and political pressure around the chair, the succession drama, the abnormal discussion about what happens next, all of this points to the same truth. This is becoming a fight over sovereign control of liquidity. It's exactly that. It's exactly that. That is the subordination of the Federal Reserve. The old arrangement where central banks could pretend to sit above politics starts breaking down when the political system decides the cost of money has become too important to leave to the table. Again, the cost of money, right? It's exactly what we heard from Ben Rickard earlier, deciding exactly if you control the cost of money and the story around it, behavior flows automatically. It's exactly that. behavior flows automatically out of the cost of money. This is why the Bitcoin fight to separate money and state is actually what's happening right now. It's actually what's happening. Energy need, just like Wall Street, they are the two leading nodes that will help change this, because they're going to be motivated in their own self-interest. They're being drafted into the war as powerful pieces, like queens on the chessboard. They're being drafted in because they will move in their own self-interest. They are part of these ventures, and if you can manipulate them, you'll win this war. Those are the two most important pieces, much more important than nation states, although nation states, of course, are part of the formula. It's their sovereignty, it's Russian sovereignty, it's Chinese sovereignty that are important. Indeed, the old arrangement where central banks could pretend to sit above politics starts breaking down when the political system decides the cost of money has become too important to leave to the temple. The real break is the order of operations. The old sequence was supposed to be discipline first, disinflation second, cuts last. What is being pushed now is preserve the structure first, inject liquidity second, and worry about inflation after. That means policy is no longer being aimed at restoring health. It is being aimed at preventing a visible fracture. Once that shift happens, the debate over ideal calibration becomes secondary. The real question becomes how much easing it takes to keep the machine standing without admitting how weak it actually is. I think if they keep going on these points here, what's happening with Sailor, for example, hold on, my kid just opened the door and it's going to bounce open a bunch. I'll just come right back. Pardon me. Yeah, it's so breezy in here that if you leave the door open a crack and don't really close it, it just starts bouncing in the wind all the time, and it will slam like crazy and scare me, or not scare me, but distract me. So I just had to go close it and make sure it was very closed so that the breeze just flows through, doesn't create extra noise. We don't like noise. We hate the noises. So indeed, when you start to see what's happening with Wall Street, that's why you can change their wants and desires. Once you change the math, it will dictate their behavior. And something did click and probably change Bitcoin forever. We're seeing both the energy companies and Wall Street begin to get the virus of Bitcoin, which will determine their actions going forward. Indeed, Michael Saylor's strategy bought almost double the Bitcoin of all the ETFs combined last week. There was a time when 1 billion trash tokens of Bitcoin buys were only possible during bull markets. Doing this near the bottom of a 50% drawdown is insane. Strategy has punched a hole in the fixed income dam, and the liquidity is flooding into Bitcoin. The wild thing is, this is just the beginning. Most advisors and portfolio managers don't even know about STRC, but it's happening, and you're seeing the whole world change as a result. We've got all the changes coming, indeed, to Clarity Act. Here it is. Nobody understands how big this is. The Clarity Act just changed everything, and most people are still sleeping. Crypto treated like gold and oil. CFTC takes over from SEC. Institutional capital unlocked. One framework, trillions waiting behind it. Banks were scared of the SEC. Asset managers needed clarity. Custodians wanted rules. The CFTC just gave them everything they asked for. The last excuse is to stay out is gone. SEC out, CFTC in, commodity framework confirmed. Both agencies ready to implement fast. No multi-year rollout. No more waiting. No more excuses. Institutional floodgates just opened. And they'll have this. I believe it will be passed in May. Because they've got to flip the entire system to the new system by May, just in time for America's 250th birthday. That's why I've been predicting, again, that this whole first year was about fixing problems. Once we're now into the second half of Trump's mandate, I predict throughout the summer, you're going to have super cheap gas prices, super cheap energy prices, no more risk of war, and Bitcoin is going to pump because it is the golden age. America's 250th anniversary is going to be a refounding of America. based on its actual constitutional republic outline. You're going to have the Federal Reserve subordinate to the Treasury, which will extract America from this cost of capital situation, from this venture that they got caught up in with the British model, with all of these City of London folks. And indeed, we have a new system that is going to flip online exactly that.
A big piece of my agenda has been crypto, our crypto asset markets. As you all, I'm sure, are tracking, there's some legislation that we're really hopefully working with David Sachs to get across the finish line and the president. But that's going to be a key piece. So the CFTC would have a broad amount of authority over the spot markets, and we're getting ready to implement those rules should the legislation get across the finish line.
I think it will. You're even getting really interesting news here, which I didn't know before, but it's important. Here you see the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, another rule change, is preparing a proposal to eliminate the requirement to report earnings quarterly and instead give companies the option to share results twice a year. The proposal is expected to be published as soon as next month. This is a bigger change than you realize, because the quarterly reporting is more of that theater you heard from Sightbringer. It's more of the ceremony. And quarterly, unfortunately, creates these really short time horizons. It creates short-term thinking. Here we can see Sightbringer saying the same thing, saying this would be one of the bigger disclosure regime shifts in modern U.S. equity market structure, full stop. This gives management more darkness and calls it long-termism. That is the real signal. And I think it is personally long-termism. So I would disagree slightly here. And that's what the cost of capital and all of this stuff brings. It brings long-term thinking back to the forefront. It brings all of these models back to the forefront. Of course, we understand in Austrian economics that it's a psychological engine, that we are working within a psychological framework. And the psychological framework that we're all functioning under is about long-term preparation, long-term thinking, delayed gratification. It's not about the math. Recalibrating America to be long-term thinking again will have powerful effects. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about yesterday, because ultimately, if we're running everything in reverse, remember, communism, right, and Marxism and all that stuff was all about the destruction of the family unit, that the family unit was going to be subordinate to the state apparatus. And that is essentially what we're going to be changing in both markets. By having a golden age, the actual implications are going to be that we're headed back to an era of long-term thinking. We're headed back to an era where we can plan long-term. Now, funny enough, the long-term planning does really organize itself around the family unit. That's one of the reasons why Marxism always talked about your chosen family. And I'm going to talk a bit about that, because we're seeing that ultimately this Bitcoin fight goes right back to that. It goes right back to the apparatus that created the funding mechanism for the nation state and the war machine back at the origins of the Federal Reserve. And this is how reality was created. Reality was created out of that, and the wants and fears and everything that flowed from that psychological projection of reality, the cost of capital, as Ben Record said, is how we get into the situation. Now, yesterday, Paul Elric died. He was one of these big Malthusians, one of these big don't have big families. Here he is. Now, people were, he's one of these global warming, kills everyone, overpopulation scumbags that came out of the academia of the 1950s and 60s. And here he is talking about what should be on TV. Audio not working. God damn it. All right, let me try it again. I mean, you're not going to believe this video, so it's absolutely sinister and incredible.
Is that the president ought to say, from now here on out, no intelligent, patriotic American family ought to have more than 2 children, preferably 1, if you're starting a family now. Not any law, but just say this is what responsible people do. He ought to make the FCC see to it that large families are always treated in a negative light on television wherever they appear. There ought to be a tremendous amount of television time devoted to spot commercials, the sort we've had against smoking. But the ones in the middle, say in the middle of Beverly Hillbillies, you get a scene which shows Los Angeles in the smog, and it just says this city has a fatal disease. It's called overpopulation, and so long. Now that sort of campaign, you could have a census, a sample census, which would see whether that was having the desired effect. If that didn't, you could move to giving women bonuses for not having babies. That almost certainly would do the job. If that didn't have the effect, then you could move to changing the tax structure so that.
Listen to this guy. I mean, absolutely disgusting. And look, they reap what they sow. Here's Starfleet Academy, right? We saw it was all about going to a school in Starfleet. They say this is the worst Star Trek ever. I don't watch it. I only listen to the reviews from Nerdrotic. But here, let me find one great part of it. Where's the found family part? Sorry, I didn't have this teed up. I'll be right with you. I just got to find out where it was. Jeez. I lost the connection to where it was. Where was the...
to collect winnings from a lottery that you didn't enter. Or I'll do.
Where was it? Gosh darn it. Here we go.
He should, but then escaped with the help of the terrorist organization and then sat in judgment over Holly Hunter and the Federation and was nanoseconds away from sentencing them to death. Well, of course, she's forgiven because she's a woman. But to be fair, that's Hollywood morality on full display. Remember, this is the same industry that had a woman write and direct a movie where Wonder Woman essayed a guy. And after Wanda Maximoff enslaved and tortured men, women, and children of a town, in WandaVision, we were told this.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
And one that doesn't get talked about enough, Rachel Weisz's character in Black Widow, who was essentially the female Mengele and mentally enslaved hundreds of women, was allowed to walk free. And that's just to name a few, and we shouldn't be surprised. And the show ends with a quick shot that encapsulates everything that Starfleet Academy is and Kurtzman Trek is. A couple of lesbians holding hands. And the underlying theme of all of Starfleet Academy, again, is chosen family, which has its origins in Marxism. Marxist theory critiques the traditional nuclear family as a capitalistic basic tool for reproducing labor, enforcing gender roles, and securing inheritance that ensures male supremacy. And don't you love it when you get Marxist themes from a giant multi-billion-dollar company that just bought another giant multi-billion-dollar company, where each episode costs $10 million and Alex Kurtzman has personally pocketed anywhere between 62.
Anyway, the point is they've completely ruined Star Trek, and they do another one of these chosen family things. It's why we were talking about that yesterday. And you can see that the idea of families, I mean, Mamdani is even out there attacking it today. Mamdani is proposing to raise New York City's estate tax to 50% and have it kick in to 750,000 instead of 7 million. Sightbringer saying this is a direct attack on the idea that families should be allowed to accumulate enough stability to leave anything behind. That's what's really going on. A 50% estate tax kicking in at 750,000 US trash tokens is not aimed only at oligarchs. In a city like New York, that threshold reaches straight into the professional class, small business owners, property holders, and families whose wealth is often one appreciated apartment, one business, one retirement stack, one lifetime of savings. At that level, the state is no longer just taxing dynastic excess. It is inserting itself into ordinary intergenerational transfer and saying half of what remains after death is fair game. This is when the mask comes off. The people who can truly escape this are the people with lawyers, trusts, mobility, and real financial engineering. The people who get trapped are the anchored class, the dentist with a brownstone, the immigrant family with one successful business, the couple who spent 30 years building a balance sheet in the most expensive city in America. The proposal sounds like a blow against entrenched wealth, but the truly untouchable by altitude. The locally rooted get harvested. The deeper truth is ideological. This kind of policy comes from a worldview that sees private accumulation as morally suspect once it crosses a modest, visible threshold. This is exactly the type of psychological change that we're getting at. It's exactly what's changing, and exactly why that conversation we had yesterday, Cernovich talking about and Matt Walsh talking about kicking your kids out of school. It's because there was a time when we believed these institutions were the thing to join. I was a big joiner growing up. I was in every single school activity. I was in every pep rally, enthusiastic kid at school. But we still had family structures back then. And I couldn't wait to move out on my own. But now for my own family, when I look at what happened, when I look at what's gone on over the past couple of years, I'm like this guy. I keep hinting to my mother and siblings the benefits of us pooling together and creating a family compound to live on. No reason for us all to fend for ourselves when we can use more and in a way less of our energy towards establishing a sustainable living environment, equally supportive in material, emotional, and physical health. It's why I think a lot of this stuff is going to change in this direction, right? When you see these Malthusian population bomb people and you wonder why we're in the situation we're in, when you look at all these bloodsuckers like Elric, right? Of course, one of the most despicable and destructive human beings to ever walk the planet, on par with Karl Marx. Hope it's hot down there, population bomb, all of this stuff. Completely insane stuff. And, you know, think about that this stuff was probably deliberate breaking of the family. This all begins at the same time as the Federal Reserve starts. This all begins with your chosen family Marxism, your chosen family state institutions and state apparatus. I mean, here they come out and admit it. Here's Merkel saying specifically what happened, right? She flooded immigrating with third world foreigners for the votes. She said this is after they already pulled this Paul Elric trick and got the birth rate way down. And now you need the foreigners, right? You don't understand. I had to import 1 million billion migrants from third world hellholes who refused to assimilate. The alternative was that the ADF might win, or AFD might win. What's their platform? Not importing 1 million billion third world migrants, mostly. It's why you get, even here on St. Patrick's Day, I mean, look at this perversion. This is as bad as Star Trek. Listen to the Irish president saying that the story of St. Patrick is about immigrant spirit. I mean, it's crazy, 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 crazy stuff. But this is what you have, and that's why you are actually in a English world civil war. This on St. Patrick's Day, she says this.
The story of Patrick's life serves as a reminder of the resilience and courage of migrants the invaluable contributions
Not even
that they have made and continue to make
killing
to the countries they now
them
call
out of
home,
their country.
sometimes even in the face of great adversity. Patrick's story speaks not only to the Ireland of the 5th century, but to the millions still subjected to trafficking, forced labour and displacement today. As we recall the life...
Shut up. She's too retarded. This is what end-stage liberalism looks like. Long-housed politicians lecturing the people they rule over that they have no home or identity of their own and must accept infinite immigrants from third world nations that have nothing in common with their own country, which no longer exists. This is what liberalism's end of history looks like. Only history does not actually end. End-stage liberalism must necessarily give way to global South Africa or Rhodesia. Once you've fully dissolved the country and redefined the people to be global citizens, what comes next is not fully automated luxury space communism, but rather existential conflict. That's why the whole space communism Star Trek thing fell apart. I didn't mind the space communism of Next Generation. It was very compelling, very interesting, and it definitely was space communism. It 100% was. Star Trek was always a form of space communism. But now that they're fully going after families, shared family, the whole point of this Starfleet Academy was school and shared families, and it was just retarded from the beginning to the end. Because liberalism has already knocked out the load-bearing support structures that once unified a society. There's nothing left to hold the nation together aside from pure inertia that cannot sustain itself in the face of rival tribal groups who do not see each other as fellow global citizens, but as hostile actors, each seeking to take over the state to reward their own clan. Every attempt to bring all the peoples of the world together under one polity will inevitably produce the very existential political conflict that liberals dread. But it's here. And this is just another example of this English Civil War that's going on that really is a war on families. It's got the migration components. It's got everything that happens when you create a financial system that defines people's wants and fears. But the good news is they're losing. The scumbags didn't make enough money, and they're not counting on the entropy that's set into their financial system. Just look at Canada, for example. Canada has now become a net importer of energy. Canada, the Canada that I grew up in, that just a few years ago, this is 2020, my whole life, Canada doesn't have an oil reserve because we simply have too much oil. We produce too much compared to our population. So we never needed an oil reserve. It's just in the grounds. Why do we need an oil reserve? Now we don't know what the fuck we're doing in Canada anymore, and we're importing electricity in Canada because we're too stupid, because we got caught up in this dumb war and Canada lost. They chose the wrong side, which is why the markets are saying that they will not last through the year. This is why Canada, and I predicted it for a long time, is going down. Not going to survive. They're going to be a casualty of this system. They're going to be a casualty of the Anglosphere civil war, and they're going to be conquered because they suck and they are going to lose. Now, when you look at all this, the state versus the family, you're going to see all of this. You're already seeing it, a reawakening of it, all the homeschool that goes on. I mean, my kids aren't part of any institution. They're 100% in the family unit. I don't plan on them ever leaving the house. I'm already building houses on the property for them, already getting them set up so that they can live with us. They're not going to any college or university. The homeschooling goes right to the end, literally till they're married. And when they even get married, they can come onto the family compound and enjoy their life there. And so right now, with this financial system changing and you see this English sphere civil war, one of the things that's going to happen next, and this is why I believe that from now, once the war is over, once we have the Iranian situation solved, the other internationalist polls all solved, you're going to see a return to this domestic success story in America, the golden age stuff that Trump really wants to run on in the midterms. And the corollary to that, and this is going to help the credibility of the family institution, because the credibility of the state-sponsored institution, those places that give you your chosen family, are about to collapse entirely. It's why you've got Scott Bessent here. Again, why I predicted audits and all this stuff are going to be the biggest story of 2026. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just unleashed the IRS, massive audits hitting banks, money services, and every financial middleman who laundered billions in stolen Minnesota fraud welfare funds. The antagonism to the state apparatus and its corruptibility is going to go through the roof in America. The distaste for government, the distaste for liberalism, all of that by the time the midterms come around are going to be so much greater than you can imagine right now. People are going to feel robbed. They're going to feel the audits are going to show them that they've been robbed and denied their birthright. It's why you had J.D. Vance talking about it yesterday with the president. This is where everything pivots to very shortly. It all goes back to this. I've got to reshare to make sure the audio comes through.
It's a very important whole of government approach to tackle the fraud problem. And let me just tell one story. One of the things that even before this executive order was signed that we were able to stop under the president's leadership is we saw evidence that in Minneapolis there were Somalis, primarily illegal immigrants, who were defrauding a Medicaid program that was meant to go to autistic children. So they were taking children who were supposed to get benefits and they were claiming that their kids were actually autistic even though they weren't. And what did this mean? This meant two things. Number one, you had a lot of people getting rich off of the fraud while American citizens got poor. And the second thing that it meant is that you had autistic kids in Minneapolis, in suburban Minneapolis, who weren't getting benefits they needed because Somali fraudsters were literally stealing out of their pocket. It's got to stop. And unfortunately, that kind of fraud is one example of probably hundreds just within the state of Minneapolis, and then it's repeated and replayed all over the United States of America. When we first started talking about this problem, the president made it very clear he wanted us to take the fraud problem seriously because nobody had until he was president. We started to figure out one big hole that existed is that the agencies of the government weren't actually talking to each other. So Treasury would have evidence of financial fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Justice about it. Health and Human Services had evidence of Medicaid fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Treasury about it. So what this executive order does is force the entire apparatus of the federal government to do two things: stop the fraud on the American taxpayer and make sure that the benefits that ought by right go to American citizens go to American.
So get ready for months of this stuff, right? And Trump, of course, also coming out and talking about
A lot of it has to do with Somalia. Nobody's calling out anybody, but a lot of it has to do with Somalia and plenty of others. And I believe the governor is complicit. I believe Ilhan Omar is complicit. I believe that your attorney general is complicit. And if they are, you're going to hopefully find out about it, and you're going to have to do what you have to do. If we found half of the fraud that's taking place in this country, and I think you have a chance of doing that, we would have much more than a balanced budget. That's the kind of numbers you're talking about.
And that's why you're going to have all of this attention. And Nick Shirley's got another video out today in California.
What do you do for work here?
What?
What do you do for work here?
Why?
Oh, we're just looking around. We're seeing all these hospices, so we're just curious.
Well, I don't know, man.
Word got out that I was inside the plaza and all the fraudsters started hopping in their cars, leaving the scene.
Excuse me. Let's see if they can just answer our questions really quick. Hello, can we ask you a quick question? Driving out in a brand new M8.
Yeah, it is.
They can't get out that easy.
Not a normal BMW.
How can I get an M8 as well? Should I open up a hospice? Driving out in a brand new M8 BMW M8 competition. Listen to this thing. This is the sound of hospice money. And this is the guy who said he's fat because of Dr. Oz. His business is not open today. Seems like this mafia right here is naming all of their companies after the word angel. We have Angels of Valley Hospice. We have Angels of Haven, Angels of Peace, Light of Angels. Yet the BMWs, one right here, one right there, two brand new Mercedes over there. It just is unbelievable the amount of money that these people are making, and they're not even trying to hide it. Buying these luxury cars, each and every single person's wearing some sort of designer clothing as well, And this building looks like it used to be some sort of old motel that has turned into some cash grab, money grab for hospices here.
Crazy. So I told you audits were going to be the whole story. You got Gavin Newsom. This is the best he can do. Making fun of Nick Shirley with some AI stuff. Not persuasive. Not going to work. Zero. It's a zero. He gets a zero for that. And so exactly what I'm saying. You've got all of these, the whole apparatus that was the beneficiary of the leaking of energy out of the family, which was these state institutions, schools, daycares, all these social services, the state itself, the welfare state itself. That is what's going to come under question as we continue to do these audits, while the golden age is about creating a new economic system that's going to lift up a bunch of blue-collar people, a bunch of hardworking people. All of these scumbag, all of these leeches and parasites are going to get audited. They're going to find out what's going on, and the credibility of the system that we've been living under since the creation of the Federal Reserve is going to come into question. We're not going to be going down that road any longer. It looks like we're having a wholesale change. You had to do the international stuff first before you got into this world of changing American domestic politics, because indeed we are involved in a civil war around the Anglosphere that was all about this economic model. It used these fake international divisions in order to consolidate power. It used World War I to consolidate power. It used the Cold War to consolidate power. And now here, finally, we see they used all of this doomerism about the environment, about the Paul Elrics, in order to further this communist fake prison of two ideas situation that we're in. And now we're going to see that the return is going to happen. We're running history in reverse. We're going to take the credibility away from these institutions. Family structures are going to get revitalized. Earners, wage earners are going to get their pride back. They're going to get their capacity to provide for their family back. And you're going to see an entirely new financial system, new reality around wants and fears and desires overwhelm the previous system. And there's no way that this is going to stop now. It can't stop. The only way it gets totally stopped is if we have full-on failure. I don't think that's going to happen. Now, there's news today. The SAVE Act is going to come through. Again, I want the SAVE Act, of course. It looks like they're going to be doing the talking filibuster somewhat. I'm not really sure about the mechanics. Here's Mike Lee describing what's happening. But what I know is, even if the SAVE Act doesn't pass, there's so much news about to break in America as we enter the next few months that vibes are going to be up again, and all of the bad stories are going to be drained out of the system. All of the doomerism is going to be drained out of the system, and you're going to have an incredible amount of optimism that's going to sweep across the country in 2026, the 250th anniversary of the United States. And I don't think we even need the SAVE Act to win the midterms. The money making and the fraud alone are going to be enough to win the actual psychological war that's out there around this election. And I think you're going to have a huge sweep, which is why the divisions amongst MAGA are going to be healthy in the long term, because that's the new dividing line in politics. Now, here's Mike Lee talking about the SAVE Act today. And that's what
it's been about 2 years since Chip Roy and I wrote the SAVE Act, which later became the Save America Act. Tomorrow, this is going to come to fruition as the Save America Act comes to the floor of the United States Senate. I invite all within the sound of my voice who would like this bill to become law to reach out to as many people as possible, friends, neighbors, especially United States senators who might listen to you. Ask them, please get this passed. Tell them we need to invoke the talking filibuster in the United States Senate. No zombie filibuster will suffice on this one. We've got to turn to this bill, we've got to debate it, and we've got to stay on the bill until it becomes law. There can be no surrender, there can be no ifs, ands, or buts, there can be no cheap imitations here. The Republic is on the line. Let's get this done.
So I'm not that enthusiastic that it's going to work the way he's describing. But again, I don't think we need it to go that way. I think there are scenarios where people open their eyes enough and change their minds. Living under fraud, feudalism, exactly, Tech Buzz. And Musk says the U.S. government will have a surplus with all the fraud and theft so rampant at an endless scale. not on the Bitcoin standard. You won't even have a state that's big enough to create fraud on a Bitcoin standard. So it's not even about transparency. It's just not, the funding mechanism is gone. The family unit will benefit, not the state apparatus of birth certificate collateralization. A huge amount of censorship if you support the actions Trump is taking against a certain country right now. I've had comments removed on multiple sites. If you go against the narrative, they remove you. Yeah, I believe that. The Telecom Act of 1996 has damaged America. We used to have 50 owners of American media, now just 6. We used to have over 60 music labels, now just 3. We've never been more divided. Do the math. Yeah, that's true. And I think that's what's changing, though. I think we'll be able to change that. The biggest change in America seems to have come from the Telecom Act of 96. Used to have over 50 owners. Yeah, it is a problem. Comedy, mysterious world indeed. Now we got some comments over on Rumble as well. Oh, Lucky's got a siren. Bummer, man. All good. Great. Great. We got MMK, RE homeschooling, would appreciate an episode focused on how to, with special focus on high school level. The Montessori homeschool programs are really good. So they're online, but I would recommend those. I'll do more going forward. Happy to. Scumbags Down Bad, Liberty University used to have a great program. There's the link. Oops, they don't seem to cover high school years. No, they're a little young, a little older. IQ damage is present, says Chef Zero. Indeed. Elric doesn't look like a ladies' man to me. No, I can see why. The schmuck wrote the population bomb, which brainwashed millions of Americans. He sure did. So we don't mind that he's gone. But I got Hank in the house. Let's see what Hank is saying today. How you doing, my man?
Hey, Nolan, sorry to keep you waiting, my friend. How are you? Happy Tuesday.
We're good. Happy it is Tuesday. Yeah, we're doing great, man. We're under less of a drone kite bombardment today. There's a couple of kites out there.
Okay.
I still don't have my drone support. I'm not doing as well as Iran. Needs some more support, from the drones. We'll see. How was your week?
Yeah, I'm good. Yours truly is a drone operator of over a decade. Get me over there. I'll start cutting those guys down.
I need you here, man. I need it. You can't hear them today, but yesterday I had about 4 of them, and they were louder than a cracker, and they're up for days. So we need to clear the skies here.
Do they have bells on them or something? How are they so loud?
It's like a kind of a ribbon that you tie in it that makes the wah 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 wah. There it goes through. So it's a wah wah wah. That's what that's the thing, is to make them loud.
Yeah.
But the problem is they leave them up for days.
Oh man. Well, aside from these miscreant kite flyers, what have you guys been chatting about on the show today?
Well, we did the best you can. It's kind of a deficit of info coming out of Iran, and that's one of the stories. So I covered a bit of Victor Davis Hanson. He's a prof over at Stanford by you. And he's the one who gave me, remember last week we talked about the good, bad, and ugly scenario. Yes. So he was talking today about what a surreal war this is, because there just isn't a lot of credible news reporting on it, because it's all an air war. So the pilots don't exactly talk to anyone. They just fly their mission. They're on base. All you're left with is the news coming out of Israel, which no one finds credible. So we have this surreal environment around us, but I think the markets definitely do a good job of betting on this so far, and they continue to show it's pretty consistent, and oil prices have been stuck where they are for about a week. From there, we moved into just what the real war probably is. It looks like we're involved in an Anglosphere type of civil war, and that if you look at Trump's actions about NATO, really about exposing their weakness and their inability to even help if they wanted. It's nothing to do with them, saying no to Trump and all that stuff. So analyzing a bit of that, and then underlining that, Trump was offered, for example, Zelensky's help. He said that's the last person he helped from.
Well, he didn't say thank you. So
he didn't say thank you. He didn't say thank you. And that, of course, the Russians have come out and said that the actual obstacle to peace is England, because they keep getting involved with Zelensky. And after his threat to Orban, saying that basically, give me your address, I'll give some soldiers your address, caused a rebuke from even the EU. So their big fighting for democracy guy who's threatening to kill the Hungarian president's family didn't go over well. You had to apologize or force him to apologize for that. So looks like looks like the economic piece is here, but it's a psychological war. So looking at the pieces of the psychological war.
Did you guys talk at all about the latest development that I heard this morning about, was it the director of the National Counterterrorism Center resigning because he said that Iran posed no threat to the United States at the start of the war, and he just resigned today? I think his name is Joe Kent. Did you guys see that? I think it's pretty new.
Yeah, no, I didn't see it. I did not see it, but Joe Kent is a pretty credible guy. I think he's from Washington State or something like that.
Sounds like that. Feels right to me, yeah.
What he is sometimes you've got candidates who can't get elected, but they're good candidates because you don't want to field a poor candidate. So he was a multiple-time loser in Washington where they thought they could win a congressional seat but couldn't. So what happens is if you go out and run 2 or 3 times, you get thrown a bone in the administration. And so he was one of these guys where maybe they didn't. This is just my hot read. That's probably it, because it does look like the Michigan situation. That guy's family was in the IRGC, and it was not a random attack. That this guy did have one of these connections. So that might have been his hands for saying it, because there were some random ones that doesn't look like the other incident that happened was premeditated. It looks like the one with the bombs in New York at Mamdani's house. It was made up on the spot.
I hate to cut you off, Nolan, but I'm going to tell you, you and your audience got to wait because we're going to talk about this on this next coming hour. So I'm going to let you finish up. We'll see you on Roxham TV News in just a bit to chat about that and more. Sound good?
Thanks a lot, Hank. See you there.
See you soon, buddy.
You heard Hank, everybody. We're out of time here. So thanks, everyone, for coming. I like watching Nolan kite pill a newbie. I never hated a kite until I met Nolan. We hate kites on this channel. Montessori, okay. Yeah, Hank, there you go. Hank the blank. All right, folks, come check out Hank's show right after this. I'll be over there. I'm about to end the broadcast here. Thanks for coming. You're going to see the logo, then the thanks for watching screen. I'm going to tell you thanks for watching. See you all tomorrow. Peace.